Happy hump day, everybody. Welcome into the Field Goals Podcast. Dan Viens joining you once again. And joining me once again, my good friend from Niners Nation, Rob Guerrera, because we got to talk 49ers, Seahawks, Thursday night football. It's been about 10 weeks since we spoke, Rob. How are things over on the East Coast where you are?
We're hanging in there.
The question is, and we'll find out a lot more tomorrow as we do each week in the NFL, is can the Seahawks hang in there? It's incredible how much difference a week or two can make in this league. Certainly 10 weeks. Last time the Seahawks met, week 2, a dominating, convincing performance by the 49ers at the time, 27-7. Just Geno Smith's second start with the Seahawks at that time. Still major question marks as to whether he could be a viable quarterback for the Seahawks. The 49ers get off to an uneven start after that. But after that 3-4 start, they've won 6 straight. They're positioned clearly on top of the NFC West at 9-4. The Seahawks have stumbled after that 4-game win streak where they beat their opponents by double digits in 4 straight games. They have lost 3 out of 4. And suddenly, because the Seahawks dropped that game to the Panthers on Sunday, this game's been shaping up for the last month or so to have an impact on the NFC West division title. Now the Seahawks are just playing for their playoff lives and need to win just to stay a game behind the 49ers. But first, I want to start with this, and then we have a lot of specifics to talk about and some real individual player storylines in this one for sure. What really keyed the turnaround for the 49ers and generally, I mean, this is a team rolling on offense, averaging almost 30 points a game over the last 6, and that includes a 13-point performance against the Saints. Where do you see this team right now? And what's been the key to this 6-game winning streak?
Well, first and foremost, the defense. So this defense has been absolutely incredible. During this 6-game win streak, they're giving up just 11 points a game. I mean, I don't care what kind of offense you have. If your D is only giving up 11, chances are you're going to be able to win some games. So everything starts there. And then offensively for the Niners, what you've seen is even with people in and out of the lineup, including the quarterback, the ground game has been incredibly consistent. They've gone over 100 yards in, I think it's 7 of their last 9 games. For whatever reason, it takes Kyle Shanahan and this ground game weeks to sort of gel, even when the offensive line is mostly the same. But now they have, and because of the defense and the ground game, they're controlling the clock, they're controlling the pace of games, and it's really just helped them move the ball up and down the field consistently.
Should we just end this show now? I mean, let's see. Seahawks giving up 200 yards on the ground routinely the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That's obviously the storyline in this game. But before we get into some injury situations, talk about the impact Christian McCaffrey has had. Obviously, questions about his durability when the trade was made, and that's probably the biggest personnel change since you and I talked last, other than the quarterback position, which we'll get to. His impact and his fit in this offense.
So he has been absolutely incredible, better than I even thought he was going to be. Now, he's been a little banged up and they sort of have to manage him during the week. But once he gets out there, since week 10, 41% of his carries have gone for 15 yards or more. That's how incredible he has been to this offense. And in that same time span, he has more receiving yards than any other running back in the league. So as perfect a fit as the 49ers could have hoped for is what Christian McCaffrey has been. He's got 7 total touchdowns and 6 starts with the team. He has become very, very quickly the centerpiece of this offense. And it's been amazing to see because, again, like he's sort of had to learn everything on the fly as we go, but he has been everything every 49er fan could have hoped for.
And fantasy football fans, and this is the first week of the playoffs for a lot of people. So what you're saying is with this matchup, Christian McCaffrey owners are in good shape.
Yeah, no worries there.
Unfortunately, I was a Christian McCaffrey owner, missed the playoffs by 1 game. I won't get to benefit from that this week. Let's talk about Deebo Samuel first before we get to the quarterback, because obviously he goes down with an injury last week that looked at the time, based on his reaction, more severe than it was. He's obviously not going to play Thursday. There's a chance he might get back in time for the playoffs. It sounds like his impact, or the impact of his absence tomorrow night against Seahawks.
It's significant. I mean, clearly they're going to be worse without Deebo Samuel. Anytime you lose somebody like that, you're never going to be the same. Luckily for the 49ers, though, like we just talked about, Christian McCaffrey's still there. Kittle's there. Ayuk is there. Jordan Mason, even the backup running back, has been pretty solid for them. So it's a loss for sure, but it's not unsustainable. Now, if they didn't have Christian McCaffrey, then you'd really start to sweat a little bit. So it just, puts more pressure on 23's shoulders, but they'll be able to sustain it because he's there.
And because they're going up against the Seahawks rushing defense. Let's get to the quarterback now. Obviously, in week 2 against the Seahawks, Jimmy Garoppolo has to come off the bench and play a situation that not a lot of people saw coming. And once he got his feet under him, was playing well. I would say, from an observer from afar, looking inward at the 49ers, playing Jimmy Garoppolo football, about what you'd expect. He was never really the storyline week to week. They didn't win or lose because of him, but he operated that offense efficiently, if that's fair. And then he goes down with an injury. And Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy, Iowa State, rookie, a guy I'm familiar with because he played in the Alamo Bowl as a freshman with David Montgomery was on that team. He had a good team there, but he was never a guy that jumped off the page or was a highly rated NFL prospect, which is obviously why he went at the end of the 7th round. He has been nothing short of phenomenal these last couple of weeks and has taken the league by storm in a much more condensed version of kind of the way Geno Smith did earlier this year. How is he doing it? And is this just another example of Kyle Shanahan's offense and how it doesn't really take an elite talent at quarterback to run it, but just a guy that runs the offense the way it's supposed to be run?
I think that's definitely part of it, right? He's in a great system and he has talent around him. That can't be overlooked. But just from Brock's standpoint, a couple of things that I've seen that I like so far. First of all, from an intangible standpoint, he's fantastic. He knows the system. He's not afraid to, get people lined up where they need to go, take control of the huddle, all of that stuff that you like to hear from someone who's played 4 years in college and has a lot of football under his belt. That's awesome. In terms of the tangible stuff, the physical stuff on the field, the encouraging thing is he does not look to hit singles. He looks to hit doubles, and he looks at those first. He's looking down the field first, as opposed to Jimmy Garoppolo, who usually looks for the closest open player to him and throws it to that guy. Brock hasn't done that. And he's also got a little bit more mobility than Jimmy Garoppolo, so he's able to extend plays a little bit, move around. He doesn't seem to panic under pressure. And so when you've got that combination, there are going to be bigger plays down the field, especially against all these defenses that for years against the 49ers have just been cheating closer and closer to the line of scrimmage because they know that Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to go over the top. Case in point, last week, Brock Purdy had 2 touchdown passes thrown 20 or more air yards down the field outside the numbers. That's more than Jimmy Garoppolo's had in the past 3 years. So that just goes to show Brock is doing this in a different way. And right now, and again, it's a very, very small sample, but right now he's giving you exactly what you need.
It's interesting because the knock on him coming out of college was he didn't have the big arm. He wasn't a guy that you could drive the ball downfield with. So interesting to see how he's fit in that offense so far. As a Seahawks fan, you talk about small sample size. The first thing that comes to mind is maybe he'll come back down to earth, because I remember Nick Mullins coming up here to Lumen Field and tearing us apart a few years ago, and I thought he was going to be the next big thing. Let's talk about Brock, though. He dinged himself Sunday, had to come out. I think he returned to the game at one point, but the game was in hand. Obviously, they blew out the Buccaneers in that one. He's got an oblique injury. He's been a limited participant in practice. They're saying it's going to be a game time decision. What are you hearing about his availability tomorrow?
So Kyle Shanahan's been a little cheeky. He says, we might not know until Thursday. I think he's going to play. Is he banged up? Yes. But Kyle Shanahan also said that it's not something that's going to be made any worse. It's going to be more of a pain tolerance type of thing. And we all know that they got plenty of medicines on the sidelines that they can give to people to get them through a game. And from the 49ers perspective, with so much at stake in this game, I mean, a chance to close out the NFC West, which would, Niners would be the first team in the league to clinch their division, which is kind of incredible when you consider everything that's happened to this team this year. but that would secure their playoff spot for them, where they could take the last 3 weeks of the season and, not that it's meaningless, but you'd be playing for seeding rather than a playoff spot at that point, which for the Niners has been very, very different because it's come down to the wire for them in recent history.
Yeah.
So I think with all that at stake, Brock's going to find a way to play out there. And I think the ideal thing for the Niners would be another situation like last week, where then they could get him out of there relatively early, and then he'd have, that mini bye week to sort of recuperate.
Just another reason why I'm sure they'll be looking to lean on that ground game. You would think with an oblique injury, if it's going to affect a quarterback at all, it might affect his accuracy, his ability to really turn it loose, especially on what's going to be a very cold night at Lumen Field. Temperatures in the upper 30s. So it will be chilly here. Let me ask you this. It has been a house of horrors up here in recent years for the 49ers. 9 of the last 10. The only win up here, the one in 2019, which ended up being for the division in their favor. Any concerns about whether this atmosphere, Thursday Night Football, Lumen Field in front of this crowd, might be a challenge for the young quarterback?
Yeah, I think you have to, right? I mean, it's a challenge for any quarterback, let alone now we're talking, 7th round rookie, Mr. Irrelevant, all of that stuff. And, it's funny. This was sort of the path that we were supposed to see with Trey Lance, right? We were going to say, okay, how does he handle the blitz? Brock Purdy checked that box because the Dolphins blitzed the heck out of him. How did he handle coverage? Well, Tampa Bay kind of stayed back sometimes and played coverage, and Brock looked pretty good there. But those are both home games, right? Now he's got to go on the road. Now this is the next sort of test, right? Playing in a hostile environment. Maybe it's going to be cold, like you said. So I can't tell you how he's going to handle it. I think it is going to affect him, because how could it not? Silent count, all that stuff. But like I said before, with the intangibles with Brock seem to be pretty good. So if he is rattled, does he feel comfortable having to call his own play if he can't hear it, all that stuff? I think he will be, but we won't know until we see it. And I'm kind of looking forward to it, because it is going to be a big test.
Let's talk about a couple other injuries on the defensive side of the ball. Cornerback Dante Johnson out for the year, ACL injury. Kevin Givens, defensive tackle, looks to be out for this game as well. I think that's an MCL, if I'm not mistaken. What impact, if any, will this have on the San Francisco defense?
The Givens injuries more important, I would say. The defensive line is just so banged up right now. The Niners had a few guys get hurt last week, and they were already dealing with some injuries. Fortunately, Eric Armstead will be in there in the middle, so he can hold it down. Nick Bosa will be available on the outside, which is nice. But the Niners defensive line depth is getting tested. The whole idea was we'll build this team in the offensive line, and then we'll go at people in waves. Well, the waves kind of not, it's pretty calm seas right now for the 49ers. They have Bosa, they have Armstead, and then they can throw a couple of guys at you, but they don't have sort of the reserves that they once had. So it's not a full strength 49ers defensive front by any means, but fortunately there are still some mainstays there that are very formidable that I think are going to give the Seahawks some problems.
Did you ever see it getting this point? I mean, we were talking about Trey Lance being a franchise quarterback at the beginning of the season. The 49ers traded a boatload to move up and get him in the draft last year. He goes down with an injury. Then Jimmy Garoppolo comes in. After all that offseason turmoil and the storyline of whether he would even come back or be released or traded, then he has to save the day again. And now you're down to your third string quarterback. Even going into this season with Trey Lance, did you expect us to be talking about a team here that with good quarterback performance is being talked about as not just a Super Bowl contender, but even with as well as Philadelphia is playing, some people are saying might be the favorite in the NFC to go to the Super Bowl?
I did think the roster had that kind of talent on it. The only question for a lot of 49er fans was, okay, how good is Trey going to be and how quickly can he be that good? That was really the only question, can he protect the ball, that type of thing. And largely this season, the 49ers quarterbacks have protected the ball, which is something that is very, very different under Kyle Shanahan. I think coming into the year, if you look at the entire Shanahan tenure, the Niners were something like minus 36 or minus 32 in turnover differential. That's what had crushed them, was that they just couldn't protect the ball. This year, they've protected the ball. So when you have a defense that's allowing basically a touchdown a game or 2 touchdowns a game, and you're not giving the ball to the other team, you're going to be in a lot of ball games. And that's exactly what's happened for the 49ers. In this 6-game win streak, they have 12 takeaways and just 3 giveaways. So if you had told me at the beginning of the year that Trey Lance was at least going to be able to protect the ball, I would have thought that the Niners would be in this sort of 9-10 win area, because this roster is absolutely loaded.
Yeah, and the schedule is forgiving as it can
Yes.
be down the stretch. This matchup tomorrow night, which to me just doesn't look like a matchup that favors the Seahawks or really gives them much of a chance in any way, shape, or form. And then you go Commanders, Raiders, Cardinals to finish out. Highly realistic this team can finish with 13 wins. If Purdy's not able to go tomorrow night, it's Josh Johnson, right?
Yeah.
The well-traveled
It's unbelievable.
Johnson. I wonder what this dude's man cave looks like. You know, players always keep jerseys of teams they've played for, frame and put them on the wall. This guy's 30 for 30 is going to be remarkable. I've lost track of how many teams he's played for and how quickly he's had to learn playbooks over and over. But is this his second turn with the 49ers, or has there been more than 2?
I think this is his. Now, he hasn't played with them every time. I want to say it's his 3rd or 4th turn.
Yeah, it feels like he's been on that roster a lot.
Yeah, and it's kind of scary to think that literally, like, you know, he could be running the show at some point on Thursday if Brock, you know, can't go, or maybe he gets hit early and has to leave for a little bit. And the crazy thing is he's only been with the Niners for a couple of weeks, and San Francisco is not doing any live reps this week. It's all rest and recovery stuff. They're not doing any full speed practices. So let's say Josh Johnson has to play for any period of time on Thursday. He will literally not have had a full speed rep with this team that he's been with for 2 weeks. That is a scary situation. But you know what, Dan, like, given all the stuff that has happened this year for this 49ers team, it would not shock me at all, because it would fit in perfectly with how this season is gone.
Let me ask you this. Where do you see this rivalry being right now? Because obviously during the Harbaugh years, it was very intense, very evenly matched teams, 2 elite teams in the NFC going at each other year after year. And you could feel that intensity anytime these teams played. It's waned since then. Obviously, the record went in favor of the Seahawks for many years. It feels, well, before I give you my take, where do you feel like this rivalry, if it is one, stands right now?
I think that the cool thing about the Seahawks-Niners rivalry from back in the day, the Harbaugh years, was it was just as much a rivalry for the players. It was a rivalry between the players. It was a rivalry between the coaches, between the what's your deal, Jim Harbaugh, Pete Carroll stuff going all the way back to when they were both in college. On every level, there was dislike there. And I think now it exists primarily among the 2 fan bases. Nick Bosa talked about this week how he doesn't feel it among the players as much. He actually said he feels it more going against the Rams than the Seahawks. So I think that it has transitioned now. We remember, because fans don't forget, right? The North remembers. We will never forget those battles that they have had. But a lot of those players are gone. Of course, Russ being gone is a huge, huge change for this thing. So I think it's more now a rivalry between fan bases than it is necessarily between organizations. What do you think?
I kind of think it's in a weird gray area right now. Like, it's almost on pause. It's flipped so quickly. You know, since the heyday of it and the Carroll Harbaugh connection, the 49ers went through some tough times while the Seahawks were sort of a perennial borderline playoff team. The shift in the last couple of weeks here, as we went through that 4-game winning streak and started to think playoffs were possible, maybe even a shot at the division, before the 49ers got rolling, this game meant everything.
Yep.
Suddenly, in the last 2 weeks, with what we've seen, 3 weeks really, with the performance at home against the Raiders for this team, and then eking one out against the Rams, and just this defense back to being shredded every week like it was the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season. It's just, I sense no optimism that this game is one the Seahawks can win. And I also sense a resignation on the part of the fan base that 49ers roster is so good and that defense is so good and it's built to last, that there was a moment a couple weeks ago when Garoppolo went down where there was some hope. Seeing how well Brock Purdy has played has just kind of pointed out how good this offense can be, regardless of who plays quarterback, as long as they're capable. I would use that word. There's a resignation here that, man, this thing has turned, and now we're the team that's chasing, and how they address this roster in the offseason the next couple of seasons will determine if this rivalry kind of moves forward in the next couple of years or not.
I'm surprised to hear you say that. I mean, like you said, Seattle has been a house of horrors for the 49ers. Even when they had Super Bowl teams in 2012, you absolutely destroyed the Harbaugh team that year.
Yep.
When the 49ers have been good, they still have not really been able to play that well in Seattle, except for that 2019 game, which was, 6 inches away from going to the Seahawks anyway. So if I were a Seahawks fan, I'd be like, okay, you never play well here. You're coming in with Brock freaking Purdy. It's not going to be a normal game. Something weird is going to happen. It always happens. I mean, even look at last year.
Yeah.
Last year, the 49ers forced 2 turnovers inside the 5-yard line and still lost, right? They had that 95-yard drive from Jimmy Garoppolo at the end of the game that got all the way down to like the Seattle 2 or 3 yard line. And then the Seahawks held firm. It's not going to be a normal game. So you're more comfortable in this situation than I am. I'm nervous already.
Well, by this time tomorrow, I think you'll feel better, or about by 36 hours from now. It's just, I think it speaks to how demoralizing it is when you just don't feel like your defense can stop anybody. And this defensive performance from Pete Carroll's crew, and whatever you can attribute it to, whether it's a failed scheme change or whether they just don't have enough horses over there, or a combination of the two, which is where I land. It looks like an unstoppable force is coming to town, an offense that's been rolling and firing on all cylinders, going against a defense that for the last 6 weeks has been the worst defense in the NFL, and for most of the season has been, except for a little blip on the radar there for 3 or 4 weeks. So a lot of things would have to go poorly early. It reminds me, a lot of people forget the tip game, the NFC Championship game here, started very badly for the Seahawks. I think it was a 10-0. It was a Russell Wilson fumble, and wasn't there a blocked punt early as well? It was a 10-0 hole they had to dig out of and come back late in that game. People forget about the drive to get him in position to win, to take the lead before the tip ended up happening. Something like that would have to happen to where the Seahawks could play from ahead, which is something they haven't been able to do recently, and maybe that just kind of amplifies the problems on defense. Since the last time we talked, a lot has happened here in regards to our quarterback. And who would have thought, first of all, that Geno Smith would have the season he's having, but also that he would be the last quarterback standing in the NFC West. From the outside looking in, what are your views on his performance this year, and just kind of how that storyline here in Seattle about the quarterback position has changed?
I'm still blown away, because I know he's, hit some turbulence here recently, but Geno's been making good throws, big plays all year long. And I think, we're at the point in the season now where there's so much film available from what teams are doing that defenses have had time to see it, analyze it, and adjust to it. And so now where I think Geno is he's at the point where, okay, they've adjusted to me. What separates the good quarterbacks from the great ones? Can Geno and the Seahawks now adjust again to stay one step ahead of the defenses and keep this sort of going a little bit? And maybe he can, maybe he can't. But that's, to me, where Geno is. I don't look at it now and say, see, I knew Geno Smith was bad, and this proves it. That's not how I look at it at all. It's just, okay, nobody was ready for Geno Smith to burst onto the scene at the beginning of the year. So I think there was, at first defensive coordinators were like, yeah, okay, he's doing some things. And then they realized, oh, shoot, this is real. Like, this guy's playing up to this level. So now they've adjusted. And now I think the last 4 or 5 games of the year for Seattle, if I were a Seahawks fan, I would say, okay, let's see if he can make that counter adjustment here. And I think he can. He's got to avoid the turnovers. That seems to be the thing that has really crushed him recently, is if you're turning the ball over, like you said, and you've got defensive problems, then you're playing complimentary football, but unfortunately it's complimentary for your opponent. And that's when things can really sort of snowball on you.
Yeah, I think and he admitted it this week that he's been a little too aggressive. It's really his first experience in the league, having everything be on his shoulders and having some success for a sustained period. And it's amazing how quickly perceptions changed. It's, the first 6 weeks, 7 weeks of the season was about learning that Geno Smith is actually really good at playing football. And the last few weeks have been, oh, okay, now it's all on his shoulders because the Seahawks running game has been abysmal and they've been playing from behind. And so he's the only thing they have going for him. It's incredible how quickly it turned here locally. A lot of fans this week think that he played terribly on Sunday and are pinning the loss on him. Yes, he had a couple turnovers early, but he's also the only reason that they even had a chance in the fourth quarter to win that game. And he actually, outside of a couple of throws, played exceptionally well and was doing the things that he had done all year to be successful and making throws that a lot of other quarterbacks in the league can't make. It'll be fascinating to see. And each week this year has just been, in my mind, just another test for Geno Smith, and he's passed most of them. Now he's going to go in a really important game. He's going to go up against the best defense in the NFC, if not the entire NFL. The jury's not out. To me, I'm convinced this is a guy you can win with for the next couple of years, and you don't need to pour a lot of resources in the draft this year into trying to take a shot at a quarterback. But just another really good test on a national stage for Geno against that defense.
And I think, honestly, if you had gone into this season before the year started and said, hey, if nothing else, this season will tell you where you stand at quarterback, I would have taken that if I was a Seahawks fan. I think like you said, there's enough data here and enough good things happening to say, this is a guy that we can win with. And if you do have all those problems defensively, maybe that's where you need to focus your resources in the offseason. So, yeah, I still think it's a house money thing for Seattle. I know that, like, you're in the mix of the playoffs and you're definitely still competing for a playoff spot, but you found out about your quarterback. You found out about a couple other players. You clearly have a running back, assuming Kenneth Walker can stay healthy. He's definitely a player there. So you found out some things about this season. Teams go through stages, building stages, and where you are in your development, so to speak. And I think the Seahawks are clearly on the upswing this year, which is not something I would have said on the way in. So let's see what Geno can do this week and see how the season finishes up here. I mean, it's not going to be boring for Seattle. And if I told you at the beginning of the year, the last 4 weeks of the season were going to matter and be exciting, I think you would have taken it.
Yeah, 55% their playoff chances, according to 538.com. After the Panthers loss, it drops to the mid-30s if they lose tomorrow night to the 49ers. It'll be nothing if not entertaining, and hopefully your nervousness will be warranted for the fan base here in Seattle as they go out on a cold night to Lumen Field and try to shock the world and pull off an upset against the 49ers. Rob Guerrera, Niners Nation, thanks again for joining me. We'll get together and chat this offseason. I love your perspective on the NFC West as a whole, and as we look at the offseason, I think the 49ers are going to face. We thought we were going to go into Garoppolo versus Lance part 2, perhaps. There were already some growing sentiment, some reports, and some whispers that Garoppolo might be interested in coming back this again for another round next year, even as a free agent. Now you have Brock Purdy playing lights out. Who knows what's going to happen next year, but there will be plenty to talk about for sure. Well, we'll keep an eye on this one. Thanks again for joining me, and we'll do this again soon. All right, man?
Anytime you need me, Dan.
All right, that's going to do it for us. Thursday Night Football on Teed Up. Tomorrow night, if you're listening to this on Wednesday. Then we've got kind of the half break week. Make sure and tune in for not only my rapid reaction show right after the game. I'll give you my thoughts on how things went. And then Monday, Michael Thomas is going to join me. We're going to do a live mock draft. We are going to look ahead and take a little bit of an advantage of that break and work together on building a 7-round Seahawks mock draft and see how that might look with the current picks that they have. Until then, I'm Dan Viens. This is the Field Goals Podcast. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. All right, man. Thanks.
I'm stunned that you're as resigned about this as
Wait,
you
wait.
are, man. I'm nervous
Oh,
as hell.
there you go. What's that? I had you potted down for a second.
Oh, sorry. I said I'm stunned that you're as resigned about this as you are, man. I'm nervous as hell. You know it's crazy shit's gonna happen.
I think the score is going to look a lot like the Tampa Bay score did.
Wow.
I just think this defense is they're not only they kind of found something. Here's what baffles me. And I'm a Pete Carroll fan, just as far as just the way he runs an organization, the culture he builds, and his energy level, everything else. Love the guy. It's almost like he's evolved a little bit to his detriment. Like more than any time in his career, he's learned to let go of control a little bit. He did that on the offense. He's let Shane Waldron run this offense, and it looks very much unlike what we've become accustomed to a Pete Carroll offense looking like. And it's been fun to watch. But on defense, which is obviously supposed to be his specialty, he kind of did the same thing. He was going to bring Ed Donatel on. He brought in Sean Desai and Carl Scott and elevated Clint Hurt. And he was letting them change the scheme away from the scheme he's run for 20 years. And it's not working. I mean, it wasn't fit to the personnel. So we got guys that are mismatched. We don't have the horses up front to run a 3-4 at all. And now they're trying to make adjustments on the fly. And it's painful to watch. It's really painful to watch. I mean, Seahawks defense is always the one given was always that we would stop the run, but we couldn't defend the pass. And now he's sold out, to change the scheme to combat that because of the way offenses are in the league right now. And now we're getting gashed. It's like the league is kind of trending. I haven't looked at any deep stats, but it feels like running the football is something that's not come back. It never went away, but the teams that are really, really good at it are the teams at the top of the league right now.
I mean, it's always a pendulum, right? It swung so far in the direction of the pass. It becomes advantageous to do the opposite, basically. And if all these defenses are set up to stop the pass, then it's like, well, shit, if they're going to give us 4 or 5 yards every time we run the ball and it's less risky than throwing, then why don't we do that? And that's why you got the Eagles and the Niners and the Cowboys all up there because shit, man, we can hand it off.
It's one of those things that just snowballs. Like because our defensive front is not getting any push, they're not keeping the linebackers clean. And so then, there are people who just think Jordan Brooks and Cody Barton are getting their ass kicked every week. And that might be fair. It might not be fair because they're having to take on blockers that they really shouldn't have to take on. And
yeah.
It's unfortunate because our secondary has been the weak link the last 6-7 years. And now the secondary is great and just full of young depth. And Woolen looks like an all-pro. And but up front, they're terrible. And they're mismatched. I was talking to a journalist buddy of mine the other day, and he laid out this scenario where if they go back to the 4-3, here's what personnel they would need to add in the offseason. Here's what they can do in the draft. If they stick with the 3-4, here's what they need to do. And if it was so ugly. If it was basically, if they stick with the 3-4, they got to trade Jordan Brooks. They got to get rid of this guy and that guy. They got to draft a ton. They got to sign free agents. Like they're just not built for it. And when they had that 4 weeks where the defense was better, for all accounts and purposes, like people that I know that know X's and O's a lot better than I do, said that they basically switched back to some of those core principles of the old defense. And now they've gone back the other way.
That's so weird.
I don't get it. I don't understand what's going on. Like they're just getting gashed up front.
Well, I got to be honest with you. I wouldn't mind a 33-7 game after all the ass whoopings that I've had to watch my team endure in that stadium.
Yeah.
God, one would be nice.
I just hope it's entertaining. Like I'll take one of those. Well, it's not going to happen though. I just don't. I mean, our offense is good, and I'm a big believer in Shane Waldron and the adjustments he makes during a game. I mean, we'll find a way to score. It won't be as bad as week 2, but that being said, we're not going to be able to run the ball against that defense, even with Walker being a full participant yesterday, which I wasn't expecting. So even if he's 100%, he hasn't anywhere to run. Like the holes just haven't been there. He's had anything he's achieved, he's done most of it on his own.
That's the one thing I'm going to confidently say. You're not running on this defense.
No.
Like they're freakishly good.
as good as our rookie tackles have been, and they've been really good, like our interior offensive line's terrible. Like they just can't get pushed, and they just can't open lanes, and Walker gets in trouble because he's a little bounce happy. He tries to cut it outside a little bit too much sometimes and needs to go north-south, but there's nowhere to go north-south. So that's why I'm saying it, barring what you're talking about, barring one of those crazy games. But even then, with this defense, we could jump out. We could flip what we just saw against Carolina. We could be up 17-0 in the first quarter, and I wouldn't be comfortable with that lead.
Man, if that happened and then somehow San Francisco came back, the Brock Purdy, there are like Brock Purdy truthers out there and have been since the second he got in. From the second he was drafted, really, which think that like he's Brady, like he's going to be the next Brady. They're convinced of it. I got so many text messages and people from being like, this Brock Purdy guy, he's really good. And I'm like, all right, I don't know like how this whole thing started, but like it's like Tuanon, except with Brock Purdy. It's weird.
It's small sample size. It's amazing how quickly people jump on and off bandwagons. I mean, you know, I wasn't kidding. I remember that game that Nick Mullins had against us, and I thought, oh, shit. The 49ers Shanahan found his quarterback.
Yeah.
Like he just shredded us. Looked like Tony Romo. Like facially, physically, the way he threw the football, everything. I thought, oh,
yeah. God, Nick Mullins was so bad. Talk about that was always what killed him. Turnovers. He used to go up and down the field, no problem. And then he would just have stupid friggin' turnovers over and over again.
You wonder if Purdy is kind of sort of a light version of Justin Herbert. And what I mean by that is that offense that he was asked to run at Iowa State just didn't showcase what he could do. I mean, it was very run oriented. It was very kind of short passing game, and you know, just didn't give him a chance to look like a dynamic player. But it also speaks to scouting and all that other stuff, you know. And heck, as much as I want the Seahawks to completely punt on quarterback in this draft, if they can find a guy like that, you know, late in the draft, like a Stetson Bennett or a guy like that can just operate the offense efficiently, that'd be fun. That'd be cool.
Yeah, he also got a little, like he threw an awful pick last week, just hideously bad, that got called off due to penalty. And then the next play is the touchdown to Brandon Ayuk. So like, that's a huge swing right there. You take a touchdown off the board for the Niners, gives the Bucks a turnover, you know, and all of a sudden Brock Purdy doesn't look like Superman. So, you know, he's okay. He's doing what a backup quarterback should do. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. That's all you need. So we'll see though. Hasn't played on the road yet. So
what it could do, you know, if he plays well the rest of this year, is even if they hand the reins to Trey Lance to start the season next year, like the leash on him, as far as the fans go, is going to be so short. The first time he has a bad game, they're going to be calling for Purdy.
Yep, which is insane. Which is why I wanted Jimmy gone to start this year, because I kept saying that exact thing would happen. And there was. They lost week 1 to Chicago, and you already had people saying, oh, Jimmy's going to be starting again soon. What are we doing? How do you lose to the Bears? It was like, damn, man. And then even in the game against Seahawks, he comes out, first drive, leaves them right down the field. They kick a field goal. Things were going fine. Second drive, he's going right back down the field again. And then he got hurt. Like, he was fine. But there's no patience, man. There's no patience. It's wild.
All right, man. I'll get this posted 20, 25 minutes, and then I'll throw it out there.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
See you.
See you.